Good morning. Thank you again for coming. My name is Colonel Downey. I'm the Sheikh Public Affairs Chief. This morning we have the SACEUR and Secretary General. They'll make 2 short opening statements and then we'll get right to your questions. Sir?
Good morning, General Breedlove, dear Phil. It's great to be back at SHAPE and to meet with you and your commanders. And for me, it has been really a great opportunity to once again to commend you and your commanders for the great work you are doing. Because what you're doing now is actually to adapt NATO to a new security environment. And the security environment is now more challenging than it has been for decades. And we are very impressed by the way you are both conducting the running operations of NATO in Afghanistan, in Kosovo, but also in the way you now are adapting our defense posture to new challenges. And this is something which is very much needed because we see threats both emanating from the east with the more aggressive actions of Russia in Ukraine, but also from the south with violence and turmoil spreading through the Middle East and North Africa. And we very much underline that the ceasefire in eastern Ukraine is the best foundation for a peaceful solution. And the ceasefire seems to be holding, but it remains fragile. And the ceasefire must be respected. We have seen the withdrawal of some heavy weapons, but it is unclear where it's now, what's the destination of the weapons that have been withdrawn. And it is important that this withdrawal of heavy weapons is complete and that it is verifiable. So I call on all parties to ensure that the OSCE monitors have the information, the freedom of movement, and the security guarantees they require to do the important job of monitoring the ceasefire and the implementation of the Minsk agreement. It is vital for all efforts to reach a peaceful solution to the conflict in Ukraine that the implementation of the ceasefire is possible to monitor, and therefore the OSCE monitors need full access and full freedom of movement. At the same time, as we see the challenges to the east, we also see the challenges to the south. And our answer both to the challenges to the east and to the south is that we are increasing our collective defense. And we are now boosting our collective defense more than we have done since the end of the Cold War. We are doubling the size of the NATO response force from 13,000 to 30,000 troops. We are setting up a new 5,000 strong quick reaction spearhead force with some units ready to move within as little as 48 hours. And we're also creating 6 command and control centers in the Baltic states and 3 other Eastern allied states. And the implementation of the Readiness Action Plan is actually something which is on track. And I'm very much impressed by the work which has been done here at SHAPE to make sure that we are delivering on the promises we made to increase our readiness, our preparedness of our forces. We have to keep up the momentum, and we currently have NATO ships exercising in the Black Sea. The United States are sending 3,000 troops and equipment to the Baltic region for training. And in the south, we are preparing to hold this autumn the biggest exercise for many years, expected to include around 25,000 troops in the exercise. These measures are defensive, proportionate, and in line with our international commitments. So we make sure that NATO continues to defend all allies against any threats, and this headquarters, SHAPE, is playing a key role. And you personally, Phil, you are so committed to the task, so I very much commend you for the excellent work you are doing, and I'm looking forward to continue our close and good cooperation.
Secretary General, thank you for being here this morning to speak with us and to get an update on our work here at SHAPE. We are, of course, delighted that you're back and you are participating again, and I know that our commanders and our senior enlisted had a great time already with you this morning in exchanging ideas and thoughts, and thank you for giving that time to my leadership team. We have a broad range of folks with us in this conference, not just commanders, but as I said, they're senior enlisted leaders from the air, land, maritime, and our special forces headquarters across the alliance. We also have folks from NATO's other strategic command. Allied Command Transformation is with us, and it is a strong partnership that we have with ACT. So we're from a wide range of backgrounds, but we're united by one focus, which is, as you mentioned, implementing the decisions made at the Wales Summit. As the Secretary General has mentioned, threats from both the East and the South have prompted a re-examination of our security strategy, and so we're in full swing moving forward with our assurance and our adaptation measures. And these will make our alliance even more ready and responsive in the future. As we do this, we continue to strive for greater coherence and mutually reinforcing actions within our alliance, with partners, and with other organizations. The commanders here today understand this challenge extremely well, and we will continue to exchange views about best practices and explore innovative ideas about how to continuously improve our capabilities. As you've heard, the work we are currently doing represents the greatest change in our approach to collective defense since the Cold War. And we are tackling these changes in a deliberated and unified fashion. I've spent many years serving among our European allies, and I'm pleased to say that I have never seen a greater degree of cohesion, resolve, and determination to ensure that NATO is ready to meet our future challenges. And I'm confident this will continue as we secure our future together. So again, Secretary General, thanks for coming back and giving us some more of your very, very valuable time. And I think at this time, we're ready to take your questions.
Sure. You in the front, please. If I could ask you to wait for the microphone and introduce yourself and your organization. Thanks.
Thank you. Ines Strazdinje, Radio Latvia. I have a question for both gentlemen. Russia is ending activities under conventional armed forces in Europe treaty. How would you comment that? What kind of consequences it might have? Thank you.
So we are disappointed by Russia's decision to suspend the participation in the joint consultative group of the conventional armed forces treaty in Europe. We still support all efforts to have arms control, and we believe that the treaty is important. And this consultative group is the body that meets in Vienna regularly to discuss the implementation of the CFE treaty. So this move follows Russia's unilateral suspension of the implementation of the treaty in December 2007. So we are disappointed that Russia suspend its participation, because we believe that to have consultations on arms control, arms reductions is important.
Nothing to add.
Okay. My name is Irina Sommer. Here, General. Here, left, right. Okay, you're right. Thank you. Irina Sommer, Ukrainian news agency Union. Also, a question for both of you. I would like to know your opinion on the Ukrainian request to the EU and to the UN to send on the east of Ukraine peacekeeping mission. Do you think it's a good idea? It's not a good idea? And which one, EU or UN, will be more effective for this? Thank you.
So what we do is that we strongly support all efforts to reach a peaceful, negotiated solution. And therefore we support both the ceasefire. We underline the importance of that the ceasefire is fully respected. We support, of course, the withdrawal of heavy weapons, and this has to be monitored. And that's now the key issue, that all OSCE monitors need to have full access. They need access to information, and they need the security guarantees they require for doing their work. And I think that what we now have to focus on is the implementation of the agreed Minsk agreement and the ceasefire, and support the established system for monitoring the OSCE monitors. So far there has been no request based on an agreed agreement between the parties for any peacekeeping force. So that's not something I'm going to speculate on. We will follow the efforts to try to find a peaceful, lasting solution and support all efforts to do so.
Brooke?
Yes, Brooke Signer, James Defense. You're putting reception facilities, infrastructure, equipment, and troops, etc., all along Eastern Europe, which is fine. But what new facilities and activities are you planning for NATO's southern flank beyond just merely naval exercises? Thank you.
Sure. So there are improvements that are a part of several actions that the U.S. is taking and that NATO is taking that also invests in the South. As you know, we have some of our best infrastructure along the Mediterranean, and that is helping us greatly as we address the concerns that our nations do have in the South. I think the most important thing to remember is that we have taken this important decision that the Secretary General talked about before, that we have to be able to not only address the East and the North, but the South. And then those exercises, those troop rotations, the ship movements and things that interact in the South to bring assurance and then adaptation to the South are all very important.
Right here in the front.
Ingeborg Mo from Norwegian Aftenposten. According to the US State Department, Russian tanks and heavy equipment have crossed the Ukrainian border also the last few days. Can you confirm this, and do you consider this in breach of the Minsk agreement, Mr. Stoltenberg?
So I will not go into specific numbers, but what I can confirm is that we have seen and still see Russian presence and strong support for the separatists in eastern Ukraine. We see the delivery of equipment, forces, training. So Russia is still in eastern Ukraine, and they have over a long period provided substantial support for the separatists. And therefore we call on Russia to withdraw all its forces from eastern Ukraine and to respect the Minsk agreement. The main focus, however, today is that we have to do everything to support the implementation of the ceasefire, and that just underlines the importance of also Russia withdrawing all its forces from eastern Ukraine and stop supplying weapons to the separatists.
In the front.
Daniel Brosler, Süddeutsche Zeitung. Question for General Breedlove. There was criticism voiced in Germany about your information policy. It was said that you are exaggerating the Russian participation in the war in Ukraine. What is your response to this criticism? And a question for Secretary Stoltenberg. Are you worried that NATO, the alliance, might not be united anymore in the assessment of the Russian involvement in Ukraine?
So thank you for the question, and I think it's important that we continue to have an open and collaborative discussion about these issues. We encourage this kind of interaction. Of course, 33 nations participate in our intelligence business. We have, of course, our 28 allies and then partners that join us as we fuse our intelligence and use the intelligence that we put together collectively in that process. And so with 33 involved, you're not always going to have exact agreement on everything. We actually encourage dissenting opinions because that brings a lot of strength to our discussions and strength to the numbers that we would have. And so we respect all opinions, we accept all opinions, and we put our our intelligence together in that manner. And I think it's an important time to also highlight that the communication across the nations, but the communication across the commanders and the communication between the strategic commanders and the Secretary General is very strong, it's open, it's ongoing, and we discuss these matters together.
Related to the question of NATO and unity, I would like to underline the following. NATO stands united. NATO stands united in our response to the aggressive actions of Russia in Ukraine. But at the same time, I think we have to remember that NATO is an alliance of 28 democracies. And it's an important part of an open democratic society that you have debates, that there are different assessments, different opinions, different views. And for me, that's not a sign of weakness that we are 28 open democratic societies. That's actually a sign of strength, that we are able to have open debates, different assessments, different views within parliaments, governments, in all the 28 allies. As long as we are able to conclude and stand together on the important issues and messages. And we stand together, all 28 allies, General Breedlove, I, all others in the NATO alliance, when it comes to condemning the aggressive actions of Russia in eastern Ukraine, the illegal annexation of Crimea, and we stand together when it comes to the very strong support for all efforts to find a peaceful, negotiated solution to the conflict in eastern Ukraine and the importance of respecting the ceasefire. And we stand together when it comes to implementing the biggest adaptation of our force structures since the end of the Cold War. So we stand together on the main message, the important issues, but we welcome open democratic debates in open democratic societies because that's part of actually the core values of the NATO alliance.
Yes. Terry from CBS.
Thanks. Terry Schultz with National Public Radio and CBS News. Two questions, sorry. I'd like to know what both of you think about Commission President Juncker's idea of establishing an EU army when you can't get 22 of these same governments to fund NATO operations. And another question on the OSCE. They have never gotten, as I understand from their briefings, an accounting of what weapons were there. So every time you say that you see weapons moving here or there, the OSCE says we have no idea what was there in the beginning. How do we know what's being moved? How do we know where it's going? How can you verify anything? So I find it surprising that anybody expresses optimism about things being moved around when you don't know where they're going or where they came from. Thanks.
I can start to say some words about so the first question, and that I will underline that it's up to the European Union to decide how they organize their cooperation related to defense and security matters. But what I would like to underline is that I welcome increased European investment in defense, in capabilities, and in their armed forces, because that will also strengthen NATO. Because 22 NATO or European Union members are also members of the NATO alliance. What I will stress is that it's important to avoid duplication, and I urge Europe to make sure that everything they do is complementary to what we do in the NATO alliance, because we have to work together and we have to avoid duplications, because that's not an efficient way of making sure that we have a strong defense, both in the NATO alliance as such, but also in the cooperation between NATO and the European Union. When it comes to the movements of weapons, I think that Phil will be...
Yes. Thank you, Secretary General. And just to pile on the first answer just a little bit, I mean, I think we need to celebrate the great cooperation that we already have with the EU. If you look to Operation Ocean Shield and Atalanta and how the EU and NATO work together to essentially eliminate piracy off of the Horn of Africa, we see continued strong cooperation in Kosovo as the KFOR and the ULEX force address some really tough issues there. So I think the Secretary General has framed it very well. We're not concerned, but what we would like to avoid is any duplication, because we need to invest smartly together in our defense of the future. I think you framed the problem very well with the OSCE, and that is that we didn't have a good view of what was there to begin with. The border remains wide open between Ukraine and Russia, and the movement back and forth is unobserved and uncontrolled. And it is hard to understand what was there, what is coming and going. The forces in the east side of the line of contact have gotten very good at hiding their movements, etc. So it's important that, as the Secretary General mentioned in his first set of remarks about the way forward, it's important that we get not only the cooperation so that the OSCE can go in and do its job, but we get the cooperation in just what you point out. We need to know the data. We need to know how much is where and have transparency with the OSCE to make this process move forward. And I would just echo again, since I haven't had a chance to say it, that now we see some success at this ceasefire, and we completely support continued success and all of the things to include empowering the OSCE that will help that ceasefire to move forward.
Radio Liberty, Jana Bespichuk. I have such a question to Mr. General. According to the NATO data available now, how many Russian troops and what are their capabilities that are accumulated along the border between Ukraine and Russia for the current moment? Are there any changes? How do you assess the capabilities of these Russian troops? And my second question, how do you think, does it really make sense to reinforce OSCE mission if it's unable to control at least more or less some parts of the border between Ukraine and Russia, because by now it was able to establish its control only over around 40 meters, while the border is 400,000 kilometers long. So don't you see that it's the main challenge, and how it could be met? Thank you.
So your first question, are there any changes in the numbers? As we have said a couple of times here, it's hard to tell. The good news, as the Secretary General has pointed out, is that we have seen some movement of the heavy weapons and some of the troops that were near the line of contact. We are unable at this point to understand where they've moved. Have they moved back across the Russian border? Have they moved to other places? But again, we support the progress which has been made, and that is that we see the movement of heavy weapons and troops away from the line. But we're unsure of any changes to any of the past numbers because, again, we're not able to monitor closely what is happening in the east. To your question on the border, I think, as I said before, right now we do not know what is happening on that border because, as you point out, it is pretty much wide open, and that's a big part of the Minsk agreements, is to try to reestablish that border, and that we will support that in the future. We think that's important.
Just to add that that's our main message today, is that the OSCE needs to have full access to both the border, but also the area where the ceasefire is meant to take place, including the line and the area where the movement of heavy weapons is supposed to take place. And as I underlined in my statement, what we ask for is both the freedom of movement of all OSCE observers, but also that they get access to the necessary information, and of course that they get the security guarantees they need. So the monitoring of the ceasefire is by no way sufficient today, and that's the reason why that's so key. Because if we want this ceasefire to be a lasting and solid ceasefire, we need improved monitoring of the ceasefire.
Gentleman there, glasses.
Jim Nuger from Bloomberg. General Breedlove, how much operational control will you have over the spearhead force, and to what extent will its deployment depend on a decision by allied governments? And for the Secretary General, to the extent this is a problem, what are you doing to fix it?
So this is a great question, and I would like to first start by answering it that there is a lot of emphasis, of course, on our very high readiness joint task force and the other adaptations we're making to Multinational Corps Northeast and the NFIUs. But the focus on the VJTF, as we call it, it is important, but it's also important to remember that this is a part of a larger adaptation to the whole NATO response force, in that all of our readiness and all of our responsiveness will be improved to make us more ready and more responsive in the near term. So the very high readiness, the VJTF, which is just one part of the NRF, which in total will get more responsive, is what you're focused on. And so we are in the middle of deliberations of how the SACEUR will be able to address the issue of responsiveness with of the force with the NAC, and I think it would be inappropriate for me to prejudge any decisions that they take, but I've given the Secretary General, the Military Committee, and the members of the NAC my military advice on how that should be controlled, and they will give me their decisions.
Just to add and to underline that, first of all, I think that decision making is key. Because if you're going to increase, or when we now are increasing the responsiveness and the readiness of our forces, of course, also decision making is a very important part of that. And I think we have to remember that this is one element in a wide range of measures. And another area of the Readiness Action Plan, which is also important, is increased surveillance, reconnaissance, and intelligence. And that is and the reason why we are focusing on that is that that will provide us with better situational understanding, a better foundation for making decisions, but also it provides us with better time to take the decisions, because better intelligence, better surveillance will also increase the warning time, because we will have more information earlier. And that actually also relates to what we are doing in the south, because now next year we will deploy the first global hawks, or the allied ground surveillance systems in Sicily, and that's a new NATO system which will increase our situational awareness. So part of decision making is to provide the information we need as early as possible, and we are increasing intelligence, surveillance, and our reconnaissance capabilities. Second, NATO has proven before that we are able to make decisions fast. There were only a few days between the decision in the NATO in the UN Security Council related to protecting civilians in Libya and the decision in NAC to take action and to send planes to Libya. And third, I underline very much what General Breedlove just said. We will evaluate, we will assess our procedures of the decision making, and make sure that they are efficient, and at the same time that we are able to maintain political control. And that's something we have to reconcile, and we have done that before, and I'm sure we are going to be able to do that also in the future.
We have time for about 2 more questions. John from AP.
Secretary General, Jim actually anticipated my question. On the decision making, could you tell us what decisions you need to make, or what decisions the countries need to make, and when you expect this new decision making paradigm or procedure to be in place to keep pace with the Readiness Action Plan? Thank you.
It's part of the Readiness Action Plan, and there are many different elements, and I'm not able to tell you the exact dates now, but it's in the plan. It's going to be something we're going to assess. But I would like to underline that this is nothing completely new, and we had the NATO response force also before, and of course we had decision making as part of that. So this is part of the adaptation. We are adapting our forces, and we are adapting our decision making procedures. But the need to have both efficiency in decision making and political control at the same time is not a new challenge for NATO. It has been there for more than 60 years, and we have been able to reconcile the two needs for more than 60 years. I'm sure we're going to be able to do it also in the future.
Up front.
Heidi Plausgaard Jensen, Jyllands-Posten, Denmark. Just a follow-up on Eastern Ukraine. You talk about you don't know where their heavy weapons is moved to. Does that mean that you see a risk that they are actually being repositioned for new battles in worst-case scenario? This is a question both for General Secretary Stoltenberg and for General Breedlove.
The short answer is yes. So that's the reason why it is so important to get full information about where the heavy weapons are now, the numbers, and where they are moved. And that brings me back to the main message today, is that I welcome the ceasefire. We supported the ceasefire implementation and the withdrawal of heavy weapons. But the key for both respecting the ceasefire and making sure that the heavy weapons are really moved as agreed in the Minsk agreement is that the monitoring of the ceasefire is improved, and therefore we have to increase the OSCE or support them when they ask for more information, freedom of movement, and the security guarantees they need.
A big part of the future success of the ceasefire will be transparency by all members involved. And so that's what we see.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for coming. If you didn't get a chance to ask your question, we'll have public affairs folks on staff all day. Please send in your questions. We'll work to get you a response. Thanks again.